From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We made the following demands, which we are still demanding today: an end to the violence, an end to the fighting, the release of prisoners, and real political reforms.
The Arab League suspends Syria for its brutal crackdown. We'll go to Damascus for the latest, then occupy Honolulu. As President Obama dined with world leaders at the APEC summit in Hawaii, the Hawaiian musician entertaining them opened his jacket to reveal a T-shirt which read, "Occupy with Aloha." Then he sang a protest song, "We Are the Many."
It started out very subtly and subliminally, and it was like, "Ye come here, gather on the stage. Time has come for us to voice our rage." Did he just say what I think he said? And then I realized that, wow, I didn't get in trouble, so I played it again.
Then, as President Obama heads to Indonesia, we look back at the 20th anniversary of the Santa Cruz massacre in East Timor, when U.S. armed soldiers gunned down more than 270 Timorese.
I lost one sister and two brothers.
It was 10 days before I was to give birth. The army was shooting people, and they would die at our feet, but we couldn't stop to help them.
I know families that were totally wiped out.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Unelected technocrats have taken over Italy and Greece as the two countries continue to battle a growing debt crisis. In Italy, former European Commissioner Mario Monti has replaced Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, who resigned Saturday. In Greece, Lucas Papademos, a former European Central Bank Vice President, has been sworn in as Prime Minister, replacing George Papandreou. Earlier today, a group of protesters gathered in front of the Greek Parliament, accusing the new government of working in the interests of bankers. Inspectors from the International Monetary Fund, European Central Bank and European Union are due to start arriving in Athens today to push Greece to take sweeping austerity measures. In Rome, people sang, danced, and opened bottles of champagne Saturday following Berlusconi's resignation. An impromptu orchestra near the palace played the Hallelujah chorus from Handel's Messiah soon after he stepped down. In news from the Middle East, the Arab League has suspended Syria after President Bashar al-Assad reneged on an offer to stop the violent crackdown on protesters and open a dialogue with the opposition. Over the past 7 months, Syrian forces have killed more than 3,500 people. Syria condemned the Arab League's decision, describing it as a, quote, extremely dangerous step, but Syrian exiles living in Jordan welcomed the move.
The Syrian people have waited for this move from the Arab League for a long time. This is the start of the path for victory. We in exile are confident that the Syrian people will win in its peaceful revolution against Bashar and all his aides.
We'll have more on Syria later in the program. 17 members of the Iranian Revolution Guard died Saturday in a massive explosion at an ammunition depot west of Tehran. The dead included General Hassan Moghadam, a key figure in Iran's missile program. The explosion destroyed the base which housed Iran's stockpile of Shahab missiles, a missile capable of reaching Israel. Iran said the explosion occurred while military personnel were transporting munitions, but Time magazine quotes an unnamed Western intelligence source saying the Israeli spy agency Mossad carried out the attack. The explosion occurred just days after the International Atomic Energy Agency released a report raising new concerns over what it calls possible military dimensions to Iran's nuclear activities. On Sunday, President Obama warned no options are being taken off the table concerning Iran.
The sanctions have enormous bite and enormous scope, and we're building off the platform that has already been established. The question is, are there additional measures that we can take, and we're going to explore every avenue to see if we can solve this issue diplomatically. I have said repeatedly, and I will say today, we are not taking any options off the table.
At a debate in South Carolina Saturday, several Republican presidential candidates accused Obama of being too soft on Iran. Former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney.
If we re-elect Barack Obama, Iran will have a nuclear weapon. And if we elect Mitt Romney, if you elect me as the next president, they will not have a nuclear weapon.
But, sir, you just described where we are today, and that's what you're going to have to deal with if you become president. How do you prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon? Is it worth going to war to prevent that?
Well, it's worth putting in place crippling sanctions. It's worth working with the insurgents in the country to encourage regime change in the country. And if all else fails, if after all of the work we've done, there's nothing else we can do besides take military action, then of course you take military action. It is unacceptable for Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, rising in the Republican polls, was also asked about Iran.
I agree entirely with Governor Romney. If in the end, despite all of those things, the dictatorship persists, you have to take whatever steps are necessary to break its capacity to have a nuclear weapon.
Republican Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann accused President Obama of abandoning Israel at a time when it could become the target of a nuclear war.
The table is being set for a worldwide nuclear war against Israel. And if there's anything that we know, President Obama has been more than willing to stand with Occupy Wall Street, but he hasn't been willing to stand with Israel. Israel looks at President Obama and they do not see a friend.
Congresswoman, thank you.
Republican Congressmember and presidential candidate Ron Paul offered a different take on dealing with Iran.
I'm afraid what's going on right now is similar to the war propaganda that went on against Iraq. You know, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and it was orchestrated, and it was, to me, a tragedy of what's happened these last 10 years, the death and destruction, $4 trillion in debt. So, no, it's not worthwhile going to war. If you do, you get a declaration of war, and you fight it, and you win it, and get it over with.
Occupy Oakland protesters are bracing for a morning raid today. Hundreds of protesters have assembled to defend the Occupy Oakland encampment. The fear of eviction comes after a series of requests to vacate were issued from City Hall and local businesses. On Thursday, a 25-year-old man who had spent a few days in the park was attacked and shot to death by two unidentified individuals. The killing exacerbated existing tensions between the encampment and city officials. Oakland's reportedly agreed to pay for up to 1,000 officers to be deployed over the next 3 days, making it the largest and most expensive police operation in the city in recent memory. Meanwhile, police in Portland, Oregon, encountered an estimated 1,000 Occupy protesters Sunday afternoon, making over 50 arrests in an attempt to shut down their weeks-old encampment. Nearly a dozen law enforcement agencies dispatched over 300 officers for the eviction after Mayor Sam Adams ordered the camp shut down. Here in New York, Occupy demonstrators held a Veterans Day march through Lower Manhattan Friday. The march ended at Civic Center Park, where a number of musicians, including Joan Baez, performed.
Let's drink to the lowly of birth. Spare a thought for the ragtaggy people. Let's drink to the salt of the earth. Let's drink to the hard-working people. Let's drink to the salt of the earth.
Numerous veterans spoke out against war and declared their support for Occupy Wall Street. Iraq veteran Sergeant Shamar Thomas described the conditions veterans face when they return from service overseas.
Come home to a nation where they don't have a job automatically set up to where, you know, they have Marines getting $1,900 to fight in a war when, you know, congressmen and politicians are making six figures. It shows, you know, how much respect this country has for the veterans, and, you know, we should be doing a lot more.
In other Occupy Wall Street news, police departments around the country conducted a number of arrests over the weekend in St. Louis. Authorities arrested 27 people who'd set up camp at a downtown plaza in Salt Lake City. 15 people were arrested. In Denver, police arrested a half-dozen protesters and removed items such as mattresses, cooking grills, and tents from a city sidewalk. In San Francisco, police claimed 2 officers were attacked by a pair of protesters in separate incidents, resulting in injuries to the officers. Neither of the alleged assailants were apprehended. In Albany, New York, roughly 24 demonstrators were arrested by state troopers after breaking an 11 p.m. curfew at Lafayette Park, a place that was state-owned property. In other Occupy news, Iraq War veteran Scott Olson has released his first public statement since being shot in the head by a police projectile during an Occupy Oakland protest nearly 3 weeks ago. Olson has been released from the hospital but is still struggling to speak. A photo has also been released showing Scott Olson smiling with a neck brace on and a scar on his forehead. In the message, Olson wrote, quote, "I'm feeling a lot better with a long road in front of me. After my freedom of speech was quite literally taken from me, my speech is coming back, but I've got a lot of work to do with rehab." Olson went on to write, quote, "Thank you for all of your support. It's meant the world to me. You'll be hearing more from me in the near future, and soon enough we'll see you in our streets," he wrote. In Brazil, 3,000 troops backed by helicopters and armored vehicles invaded Rio de Janeiro's largest slum Sunday in a security operation ahead of the World Cup in 2014 and the Olympics 2 years later. The raid of the hillside favela began at 4 a.m. on Sunday. The troops encountered no resistance. The authorities had announced their plans days in advance. In news from Africa, Sudan's being accused of bombing a refugee camp in the newly formed nation of South Sudan, killing at least 12 people. The bomb hit a region where over 20,000 refugees live. Growing violence along the border between the two nations has forced Oxfam to withdraw aid workers from the area. Hervé Latsus is the chief of UN peacekeeping in the region.
On the 9th of November, UNMISS was informed by government of South Sudan officials that up to 9 bombs had been dropped in the areas of New Kufa and Yafta in Maban County, Upper Nile State. That is to say, very near the border with Blue Nile State. The areas are gathering points for tens of thousands of refugees from the fighting in Blue Nile State. Humanitarian partners report that approximately 55,000 people, including refugees, returnees, and internally displaced persons, are currently on the move as a result of the bombing.
A new study has found 17.3% of adults over the age of 25 in the United States have no health insurance, up nearly 3 percentage points over the past 3 years. And Sunday marked the 10th anniversary of President George W. Bush's executive order to form military commissions to try prisoners captured in the so-called War on Terror. One of the strongest critics of the military tribunal has become retired Air Force Colonel Mo Davis, a former chief prosecutor for the Guantanamo tribunals. Davis recently said, quote, "I think we've botched this so bad that we're past the point of redemption." Attorney Michael Ratner of the Center for Constitutional Rights compared Bush's executive order to a coup d'etat. Ratner said, quote, "Under that order, the president gave himself the authority to direct the capture of any non-citizen anywhere in the world allegedly involved in international terrorism and detain that person indefinitely without access to the remedy of habeas corpus." Despite the widespread criticism of the tribunal system, President Obama has backed the use of the tribunals to try prisoners at Guantanamo. Abdurrahim al-Nashiri was arraigned last week in the 2000 bombing of the USS Cole off the coast of Yemen. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.